Welcome. Welcome to the Tell Us Your Story final storytelling event. We're really thrilled to have you here. This is a celebration of storytelling. And I'll tell you just very briefly about myself. My name is Laura Sturza. I'm a writer and teacher living in Rockville, Maryland, and I write essays like you're going to hear today, short memoir pieces, personal essays, and I also am a journalist. And so my work has been published in a bunch of newspapers and magazines. I've also written my first book, which is a memoir about getting married for the first time later in life. It's called Better Late: The Making of a Midlife First-Time Wife. And because of the harrowing experience of writing my first book, I decided that I really had to teach memoir writing. And I absolutely love working with older adults. Y'all have stories to tell that are just absolutely off the charts. And I'm very, very passionate about this project and about getting the opportunity to do it. And with that, I want to thank the partners who made this happen. And the partners here are the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County. So they funded this project so that I could offer this class at no charge here. And the other major sponsor is Montgomery County Recreation. They gave us the space to do this, all the facilities, all the support. I mean, we have had people setting up tables, setting everything up, setting up this TV, this microphone. Everything you see here, they did for us, and I'm extremely grateful to them. And I also want to thank our partner, MMCTV, who is filming us, and they are a nonprofit based in Kensington. They do an incredible job of filming, so we're going to have a recorded record of this event so that the friends and family that couldn't be here will get a chance to see these readers beyond today. So I really, can we just have a round for all the folks that helped make this happen, because I'm super grateful to them. Okay, so just to set up the scene of how this all happened, for the past 9 weeks, I've had a group of brave and talented local writers. They took part in the Tell Us Your Story class here at Wheaton Senior Center. They are folks with a wide range of experiences and backgrounds. And some are newer to writing. Some have spent their careers writing in different fields. For example, one of our readers is someone who worked in science writing for her whole career. So very broad range of experiences. And through creative writing exercises, lectures, discussions, and take-home exercises, which I have to say this class really gave their all to their take-home exercises. They worked their butts off, and you'll see the results. They expanded their skills in order to write funny and heartfelt and engaging stories that you're going to hear today. They wrote about topics including places that they've lived, shopping excursions, vacations, favorite foods, family, community, occupations, and more. They learned writing techniques, and I just want to point out these writing techniques because you're going to hear them brought out in the writing. So each week we focused on a different technique: how to evoke emotion, how to use dialogue, how to include sensory details, such as how something feels, smells, tastes, looks, sounds. They learned how to use outlines to outline their story. They learned how to read aloud, and they learned how to offer thoughtful and kind feedback, and they excelled at doing so. The feedback and the discussions we had in class were so engaging and helped writers to strengthen their work. Not every writer has the same goals. Some are looking to record their stories for family and friends. Some hope to reach a wider audience. Some want to write a full memoir. All those different goals are honored in the class, and there's an opportunity for anyone to participate. Now, what I want to say is part of the reason we like to do a public event is we really hope that y'all are inspired to go home and start doing some writing of your own. And I think after you hear some of these stories, I hope you will be. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first writer today, and that's Camille Lund.
Our family worked a lot. Mom and Dad wanted us to know how to take care of a home. So they taught us to do many things and expected us to help with a wide range of responsibilities. By the time I was 8 or 9, I could cook full meals from scratch, wash dishes, mop floors, vacuum, and clean bathrooms. I helped with home canning, worked in the garden, and did yard work. I was proud I knew how to do all those things, but I also knew my friends didn't have nearly as many chores as I did. By the time our work was finished, it often felt like there was very little time left to play. So when our friends, the Nixons, invited us to go camping with them at Lodgepole Campground in Daniels Canyon, we were excited. We had never gone camping as a family before. They had, and they helped us figure out what equipment to bring and what meals to plan. Dad somehow fit everything into our Ford Galaxie 500, the 6-man canvas tent, sleeping bags, Coleman stove and lantern, cooler, food, and enough camping gear for 6 people. We squeezed ourselves into whatever spaces were left and headed for the mountains. When we arrived, we helped unpack the car, set up the tent, and unfolded our sleeping bags. Then something unusual happened. We were free to play for hours. My siblings and I joined the older Nixon children and explored the campground. We played hide and seek through the trees. We climbed over fallen logs. We hiked on trails and even went on an outdoor treasure hunt and were rewarded with a pile of candy as the treasure. The entire campground smelled of pine. Chipmunks scampered up tree trunks and crept into campsites, looking for crumbs. A little creek trickled over the rocks while birds sang overhead. Best of all, no one was reminding us that there was work to be done. We had time to play until we were tired of playing. Mealtime was extra special. Mom bought a cookbook called Roughing It Easy by Diane Thomas, which taught about cooking while camping, and we tried out several ideas from it. One of the fun things we learned to make was bacon and eggs in a paper bag. We lined the bottom of a brown lunch sack with bacon, cracked a couple eggs on top, folded the top of the bag over a stick, and held it over the hot coals. For another breakfast, we filled orange halves with biscuit dough and eggs and cooked them near the edge of the fire. The orange rinds gave the biscuits and eggs a slight orange flavor, which was good for the biscuits. In the evening, we each made a foil dinner with a hamburger, onions, carrots, and potatoes and cooked it in the hot coals. For dessert, we made banana boats filled with brown sugar, marshmallows, and chocolate chips and tucked them among the glowing embers until everything melted together. These new ways of cooking made every meal an adventure. The food tasted delicious, and mealtime seemed almost magical. After dinner, we sang songs around the warm, glowing campfire. We started with silly songs that the Nixons taught us. My favorite was Throw It Out the Window. We took turns choosing nursery rhymes and sang them to the tune and replaced the last line with Throw It Out the Window. Next, we sang rounds. When everyone's voices blended together while singing different parts, it sounded so beautiful that I wanted to keep singing just to hear it again. We ended our evening by singing gentle, sacred songs before heading to bed. Our whole family shared a single cabin tent. Mom and Dad were in the center, and the children were on either side. In the morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the tent, birds singing, and the rustle of quaking aspens. Dad was already up, and I could hear the campfire crackling and popping. The mountain air was cold and crisp, so I wriggled out of my pajamas and into my clothes while staying tucked deep inside my warm sleeping bag. Then I jumped into my coat and shoes, unzipped the tent, and ran straight to the campfire to drink hot chocolate and warm up. After breakfast, we could play all day again. We stayed another night and then packed up and went home. We had so much fun that camping with the Nixons became a family tradition for the next few summers. Looking back, I think what made those camping trips so unforgettable wasn't just the mountains or the campfire meals. They brought our family together in a way that our everyday routines didn't always allow. We worked together to set up the camp, prepare our meals, and then spent hours playing, exploring, singing, and laughing together. And for 2 whole days, there was no work that had to be done. No floors to mop, no dishes waiting in the sink, no fruit to can, no garden to weed. We simply played. Those days felt wonderfully carefree, and they remain some of my happiest childhood memories.
Beautiful. Thank you, Camille. Thank you so much. Okay, we're on to our next storyteller. And our next writer is Salome Nwasu. Come on up, Salome.
My title is Miss, my kindergarten teacher. My one indelible memory at 6 years old. Did you hear? Hear what? They want us to drink that powder thing because they want us all to die. Who wants us all to die? The Oyibo people who sent the powder to us. Oyibo means white person, in this case referring to our then British colonizers. What powder? And who told you that? Miss said that she will mix that powder in the bucket with water and that we all must drink it. There was an eerie silence as the small group of kindergartners in yellow and green school uniforms huddled like a large bouquet of flowers on the grass right outside the middle classroom of the L-shaped primary school building, next to the room where the infants played and prepared to enter kindergarten the next year. It had been a confusing couple of days since we were told that we would be getting something new to drink at school. Why do you say that they want us to die? I asked, to no one's surprise, since I had earned the reputation of the girl who asked too many questions. The other children nodded in agreement and turned to our informant for answers. My mother told me not to drink when they give it to us, she whispered. But why? I insisted. I don't know, she shrugged. Clang, clang, clang. The handbell called us back to class. The first short break of the day was over, and I wondered when the drink would be distributed. I wondered how Miss will make us drink it. Was she going to do it the same way my mother did when she took my siblings and me by the hand, kicking and screaming, to the drugstore for our monthly dose of castor oil, mixed with something that smelled quite awful, probably turpentine. Oh, how we dreaded those monthly visits, even though our mother did her best to share what she knew about preventing tapeworms. In the early days, when modern sanitation was just beginning in our city, Port Harcourt, and other Nigerian cities, tapeworm disease was common, especially among young children, whose frequent and direct contact with nature made them more prone to infection. My mother said that was why we had to swallow that horrible concoction, which she deemed absolutely necessary. But how would Miss, our teacher, manage to get all the children in the class to drink this unknown substance? Unlike many other parents, my mother and father, though barely educated, were privileged to have friends from church who talked about different issues at the time, including the benefits of the proposed addition of supplements for school-age children. I remember that my papa and mama said it was okay to drink the mixture, but then I wondered if the other children don't want to drink it, maybe I shouldn't. The class was unusually quiet as we practically tiptoed to our tables. Those of us in the front row were the first to notice that the bucket holding the white powder, which was sitting on the floor by the teacher's table, had been joined by a large water jug. "Settle down, children, and bring out your cups. I'm about to mix this wonderful drink for all of us to enjoy. It's delicious and good for our bodies." Miss was practically dancing and singing her instructions while placing the containers on the table and ceremoniously opening the bucket of white powder. With her left hand, she lifted the water jug and began slowly to pour the water into the bucket while her right hand stirred the mixture with a long ladle. The children began to turn around and look at each other, eyes narrowed and questioning. The uneasiness was palpable. I turned to look at Miss, knowing that she would expect me to model for the others, as she often did. Second only to my mother, Miss was always a source of calm and reassurance for me. Our eyes locked, and she immediately beckoned me to come up to the table with my cup. As I reached the table, a sudden commotion at the back of the classroom prompted us to turn quickly, in time to see my fellow classmates hurrying toward the back windows. They pushed the table against the wall and hoisted themselves through the windows. Little girls' dresses were flipping up, exposing colorful and questionable undergarments for those who had them at all. I quickly turned to Miss, who always calmly said, with a wave of her hand, "Sit down here with me, don't follow them." Miss and I both sat at the table and watched as all the children left through the open windows, helped by some of their older siblings who had run from their own drink distributions to save their younger siblings from what they perceived as impending doom. The clamor outside told us that what was happening in our classroom was also happening in the other classrooms. The school was in complete chaos. We waited. When the noise died down, we knew the show was over. Most of the children had left the school. The few that remained were clustered outside on the grass, away from the building. Miss simply shrugged, turned back to mixing the drink. Awestruck and bewildered, I watched as she filled my cup and hers. Then, with a reassuring smile, she took a sip and ran her tongue round her lips. In her approval, she drank it all. I followed, drinking slowly at first, and then more intently as I started to savor the tasty treat. We began to giggle as we sat together in the quiet building, enjoying the beverage that had so terrified my classmates. a mixture of water and vitamin-fortified powdered milk that would become a part of the daily lives of me and my classmates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salome. I just want to quickly point out a couple of the ways that our readers are employing the techniques that they learned here. In Camille's piece, those of you who were able to hear it could hear, you were brought into the story through the way she used sensory details. We could almost taste the marshmallows and the hot chocolate, and we could feel the cold in the air when she woke up and got out of the tent. And so this is one of the tools that a writer uses to bring you into the story. And then in Salome's piece, she did a wonderful job of using dialogue, and we got to hear the back and forth between her and her beloved teacher. And we also, one of the things, we had several humorists in our group, and she was one of the folks to employ humor in her writing. So with that, I'd like to bring on our next reader, and that's Marilyn Kresge-Wolf.
My father, Lawrence Kresge, grew up in Manhattan's Upper West Side in a modest old apartment building on Amsterdam Avenue, across the street from his mom and dad's little grocery store, Kresge's Dairy. His parents were Jewish immigrants from Lithuania, and he had 2 brothers and a sister. His sister Betty and he were the only ones who went to college. They were good students, but their 2 brothers were not, probably due to learning disabilities. For a while, Dad taught in New York City schools. His brothers Milton and Eddie pumped gas and later relied on jobs that my father found for him. Dad attended the City College, New York, and earned a bachelor's degree in teaching. But during the Depression, jobs for teachers were scarce, so he delivered mail for the post office. Then he trained to become a postal inspector, which he was for the rest of his career. My mother, who had grown up in an upper middle-class neighborhood in New Jersey, longed to be out of the apartment they shared in the same building he grew up in. Dad wanted to live near a beach and have a yard and garden, so we moved to Long Island when I was 4 and my sister was 10. He commuted back into the city on the Long Island Railroad. The main post office, a large, imposing white building with many steps, was not far from Penn Station. You have to be New Yorkers a little bit for this. Across the front were words that read, "Neither rain nor storm nor dead of night shall keep these mail carriers from their appointed rounds." He took me to see it when I was a young kid. I thought of my father as a hero. He was tall, dark, and handsome in the suit and tie he wore for work. He took on various assignments. For one, he went on nighttime stakeouts to watch out at post offices where people had personal keyed boxes and who were suspected of committing fraud. All this was very intriguing to me, especially since he had a post office-issued gun to take on his stakeouts. He kept it in his underwear drawer, unloaded. I thought it was dangerous and glamorous. My childhood until college was spent in North Belmore, Long Island, about an hour from Manhattan, in a small ranch house with a small yard. My dad, a multifaceted man, was in paradise with his small black yard where he started a vegetable garden and grew tomatoes, radishes, lettuce, carrots. He also planted peach, apple, crabapple, and pear trees and berry bushes. He was an early organic gardener, and I was often his helper. It made sense why he wanted to move from the city. In our suburban home, he was in his element. He also constantly barbecued in the summer on a small charcoal grill, steak, hamburgers, hot dogs, corn, and fish without barbecue sauce. We went to Jones Beach nearly every weekend. He never complained that he had to commute via Long Island Railroad to work every day at the main New York City post office. As time went on, he specialized in gathering evidence about people who sent pornography through the mail, a federal crime. I remember times when I came home from college, a very liberal college, and argued with him about this particular work. I told him I thought if kids were the target of pornography, it was harmful, but I couldn't understand why adults were committing a crime if they mailed items to other adults. He explained that unknowing adults could be vulnerable too and could get into trouble just for receiving the mail. Eventually, we stopped arguing about it. The last part of my father's career with the Postal Service took him to work in D.C. as the head of the Organized Crime Task Force of the U.S. Postal Service. He was the son of immigrants who had pulled himself up by his bootstraps and reached a high and very responsible position in the federal government. I am forever proud and amazed by how much he achieved. He did have his faults, the most serious being his occasional temper. To this day, I really don't understand where that temper came from. The modest upbringing, frustration that his career blossomed later in life, anti-Semitism that he might have experienced but didn't discuss. Perhaps his adored mother never chastised him. I really wish I had talked to him about it and planned to talk with my sister to tell me what she experienced. But for sure, growing up around my father's occasional temper and my mother's ultra-sensitivity is one of the reasons I became a psychiatric social worker. His dedication to his federal job and his sense of justice, his fundamental sweetness, despite his temper, and devotion to his family outweighed any negatives by a very long shot. Thank you.
So one of the things that students worked on was how to evoke emotion. Now you're hearing that through all the pieces, but I'll just point out that some of the ways that Marilyn does that in her piece, a particular moment that jumps out at me is when she says neither rain nor snow, and being a child looking up at that sign. And so we talk a lot about creating a scene that takes readers into the scene. And that's just what she's done. She's brought us into the scene. We get to be there with her and stand beside her father with her. And that's one of the ways that students are evoking emotion. And now I'd like to introduce our next reader, and that is Lauren Lund.
My mom loves to win free stuff. And this love has been expressed in different ways, over the years, but never more directly and with so much delight as when she was an avid contester. A contester is someone who enters sweepstakes and corporate contests in a deliberate and repeated manner in order to win prizes. This was the day of rotary phones, so there was no internet, there were no home computers, there were no modems. Mom spent hours each day reading contesting magazines and newsletters, selecting specific contests to enter and crafting strategies to win. Contest entries were typically a word or a phrase written on a 3x5 card, along with the submitter's mailing address and phone number on the back. The card was placed in a legal-sized envelope and mailed to the contest's submission address. On a certain day, the contest organizers would reach into the huge pile of envelopes and select one. And whoever's card was in that envelope would be the winner. Ideally, you would have lots of entries in the pile. You would want them spread all throughout the pile, not all clumped together. And thus, my mom would mail a fixed number of envelopes each day, but from different post offices and at different times, in order to increase her chance of winning. She would buy stamps and cards, envelopes and pens by the hundreds to keep up with the many contests she would enter on a weekly basis. Those piles of entries would often have hundreds from my mom when the winners were announced. During the contesting years, my brother Marlon, who was child number 8, was born. He had many serious medical needs right at birth, which required surgeries and extended care, our blessings and a lot of prayers. After several weeks, Marlon seemed to be doing okay, to everyone's relief. However, those weeks yielded a very large medical bill, much more than a large family's budget could handle while temporarily living on Dad's night watchman's salary. He worked that job because they let him do his accounting homework while he was in school after leaving the military. Determined to get those bills paid off as soon as possible, my mom set out to use contesting as a way for her to bring in extra money. Mom's favorite contest was the annual Benson and Hedges 100 sweepstakes. Benson and Hedges is a cigarette brand, and 100s are their flagship product. Every year, the Benson and Hedges sweepstakes would feature 100 different contests, run all at the same time, where the winner of each contest would win 100 of something. Say a rose delivered to your door for 100 consecutive days, or 100 pounds of potatoes, or 100 silver dollars from the mint. The contest's grand prize was always 100 $100 bills, $10,000. This particular year, Mom set out to be the lucky one winner out of the hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of entries submitted worldwide to collect those $100 bills. The twist regarding the Benson and Hedges 100s contest was that you had to mail an empty cigarette package in the envelope with your information card. In Salt Lake City, Utah, most religious families don't smoke. And there are a lot of religious families in Salt Lake City, Utah. So in my house and in my neighborhood, there weren't very many empty Benson and Hedges 100s packages lying around. So my mom would pester my Uncle Steve. He was the production manager, at a large candy factory in Salt Lake City, and he had a buddy. And that buddy smoked Benson and Hedges 100s on his breaks. So Mom would call Uncle Steve and say, I'm collecting Benson and Hedges 100s things. And almost daily she would call and seek updates from him about collecting his buddy's packages, cigarette packages. Now, most years this yielded a dozen or more packages. This particular year, Uncle Steve's buddy was trying to quit smoking. We weren't sure if it was okay to pray for somebody to fail in their attempts to quit smoking, so we didn't say anything. Uncle Steve's efforts, however, during this time yielded a grand total of 4 empty packages and a promise from him not to tell his buddy's wife that he had smoked them because she thought he had totally quit. And so, using all the craft and experience that one can put into 4 entry submissions, my mom prepared the envelopes and we sent them on their way. We waited, not very patiently, but we waited. And then, shortly before winner announcement day, my mom got a phone call informing her that she had won the $10,000 grand prize of the Benson and Hedges 100 sweepstakes. Now, one might expect that call to be followed by screaming and dancing like on The Price is Right, but not my mom. She just did a fair amount of crying. That let us all see how much she was worried about those bills. That was the year I learned that my mom is basically Superman. She can do anything.
Thank you, Lauren. One of the things that we work on in our class is building drama, We talk about there being a dramatic arc to a story, where you're slowly winding the reader up, taking them on a journey, taking them. And that's, you can hear that in all the stories, but I'll just point out how Lauren did that. Built us up. There's no way, only 4 packages. She can't. And then we get to that dramatic climax where she does, that peak emotional moment. Okay, my goodness. It's interesting because this class, the readers today, many of them are focused on portraits of people very dear to them. So we're having at least three different takes on parents today. And our next reader is Andra Jones. Let's test it.
Testing. Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andra Jones, and today I'd like to read a story I wrote entitled Life After Death. It was April 2nd, 1981. The moment I picked up the phone and heard my brother's voice, I knew something was wrong, because he hadn't called me since I left home for college in 1976. After saying hello, he got right to the point. "Mom died today," he said. "Stop joking. What do you want?" I responded. The slight pause and his tone told me that this was no joke. He choked up as he repeated that Mom had died. Tears started flowing before the sentence even landed, and I could hardly speak. My brother asked me if anyone was with me, and I said no. I told him I would call him back after I booked a flight. Then he said, "We're all here waiting for you." I was barely functional, yet I managed to call my roommate, notify work, book a flight, and pack a suitcase, all while trying to absorb the shock of the news. My roommate left work immediately and drove me to the airport. Tears were my constant companion from the moment I left Maryland until I arrived at my family's home in Illinois. En route to O'Hare Airport, a flight attendant asked if I was okay. I responded yes, but in reality, I was anything but okay. A few hours after I learned that my mother was gone, being okay seemed impossible. About 45 minutes after leaving the airport, we arrived at my family's home. Things looked familiar, yet I knew that everything had changed. I entered the house, and my eyes were instinctively drawn to the dining room table, where my mother would have been waiting for me. Instead, some of my other relatives sat there. Upon seeing them, I unleashed an anguished outcry so raw that it led my aunt to announce to no one in particular that they should get some smelling salts. I slowly trudged from the living room to the bedroom, where I took refuge. However, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, fully aware of a new reality. I was 23 years old and motherless. I was her baby, 10 years younger than her oldest, and we were close. When I first saw my sister at home, she said they had discussed how to break the news to me and whether someone should tell me in person. They wondered if I would make it. I had made it, but I didn't know if I could survive seeing her lying in a casket. My mother hated open caskets, so we had a private family viewing at the funeral home. As the day approached, my mind was flooded with memories of things that would be our last, although I didn't know it at the time. I had last seen her just 3 months earlier when I went home for Christmas, which was a happy time. Less than a week had passed since the last time I spoke to her, and I could still hear her voice. In February, she had sent me what would be the last birthday card. I kept it, and I knew its message by heart. It read, "Happy birthday to a daughter who's the apple of my eye." There would be no more. On the day of the viewing, we walked into the funeral home, and my steps grew measured as we neared the parlor. The open casket lay in the front of the room. My mother wore a pastel peach dress, a gift from my sister that she had never worn, and she held a single rose in her clasped hands. I looked at her and thought, what they say is true. She looks like she's asleep. I wanted to tell her that everything would be all right, but I couldn't. Much later, I would realize that I was all right enough to keep going, but not all right enough to feel whole again. I would always carry her memory along with the weight of her absence. My two sisters sat next to each other, and I sat behind them. They were sobbing, their separate cries becoming indistinguishable as they merged into a crescendo that broke through the heavy silence filling the parlor. My aunt came over to console them, and she pointed out that I wasn't crying, as if the comparison would be enough to suppress their emotions. It wasn't. I sat still, completely silent. I waited for the tears to fall, but they never came. Then, out of nowhere, it hit me, and it hit me hard. My sisters wanted to cry. I wanted to die. I wanted to die. As I looked at the casket just a few feet away, I begged her, "Take me with you. Don't leave me here all alone." If I could have died right then and there, I would have rejoiced, knowing that we would be reunited. She was my mother, and no one else could fill the void she left behind. She would have been there when the man I wanted to marry broke up with me. As a breast cancer survivor, she would have supported me when I had a suspicious lump removed at age 29. And she would have celebrated with me when I moved into my own apartment. My mother didn't just give birth to me, she gave life to me. And my life after her death would be forever changed. Thank you.
Now, I told you these students are brave, right? We would sit in class and hear a story like this one, and we heard several stories that left us speechless. Just incredible courage for writers to tell their truths. So we thank you. All of these writers have just pushed themselves. And I want to say, because I'm trying to point out some of the craft in these stories, that one of the things, again, taking us into the scene, that moment when she walks into her mother's house, expecting to see her mother at the table and she's not there. It's, we all feel that. We're right there with her in the scene. So this is the power of memoir, of a writer being able to take you into their lives and share something that may not be your exact experience, but it's a relatable experience. We've all experienced something akin to these stories that we're hearing today. And that's what's so powerful and moving about people telling their own stories. And with that, I'd love to bring up our next reader, and that is Karen McFall.
I've come unglued. At the end of October 1977, I was the proudest 11-year-old in Perryopolis, Pennsylvania. I had spent every afternoon for over a month cutting, sewing, and painting what I was sure was the finest Halloween costume in all of Fayette County. A down-to-the-detail replica of an Elmer's glue bottle, complete with an orange vinyl cap and a drawing of Elmer the Bull. I had dreamed of donning my costume, walking around the town circle in the Perryopolis Borough Halloween Parade, and being the first one tapped to win one of the coveted $5 creative costume prizes. My heart pounded with excitement as my mom, dad, and 4-year-old brother Brian and I headed out for the parade. I felt a little bad for Brian, who was wearing a costume my mom had thrown together the night before. She had him carrying a sign that read, "Nobody's perfect," and he was wearing mismatched everything. Socks, shoes, gloves, a silly mask, a floppy hat, his play guitar, and a big pillow attached to his rear end to give him a gigantic backside. I thought that he looked like a ridiculous, badly dressed toddler. My brother was just too young to care what he looked like. His only concern was having any costume as a means to an end, getting candy on Halloween. The parade began and we made the first loop. A judge was coming towards us and I just knew he was headed for me. He wasn't. He tapped my little brother Brian as the parade's first $5 winner. I could already feel the tears starting to build inside of me. Each time I walked around the circle, I was more and more desperate, willing someone to pick me. Then I heard the dreadful announcement. Thank you all for coming. All of your costumes were great. Congratulations to our winners. Happy Halloween. I was crushed, my body feeling too hot within the walls of my costume, my tears threatening to spill, but my pride saying, I will not cry. I will not cry. When I got home, my family tried to help, but my mom's gentle words, my dad's humor, and my brother's hugs couldn't comfort me. I loved my brother, and I should have been happy for him, but I just felt too sorry for myself at that moment. I ran upstairs, slammed my bedroom door, flopped onto my bed, and finally broke down crying. I fell apart, completely unglued. It wasn't until several weeks later that I started to heal with the arrival of a surprise package in the mail. It was filled with 10 bottles of Elmer's glue and Elmer's craft idea booklets. But the best part was the letter inside saying that my mom had sent them a picture of my costume, explaining how hard I had worked on it and what had happened at the parade. They said they were amazed and proud of what I had done. As an adult, when I reflect back on that experience, I appreciate my 11-year-old self, a kid who was so earnest in her desire to stand out on her own terms, so confident that if she worked hard enough and long enough on her costume, she would be noticed. Winning the contest was about more than the $5 prize or a little brother who won instead of me. It was about the love of a parent who always seemed to know how to glue the pieces back together.
Thank you so much, Karen. I told you all. I told you. So, Karen, too, does a wonderful job of that process of building drama, right? We don't know how it's going to turn. And then a surprise ending out of nowhere, right? One other thing I want to mention about these writers is that I told you how hard they worked from home. And part of what they did is we went back and forth. They sent me one of their stories and I sent them notes and they edited them. And they worked really hard. And editing is one of the prime things that tightens a story. I have stories that I've worked on for years, tightening them, changing them. And you can hear the craft really come out. I would get stories back from these writers. Suddenly, oh my gosh, they filled in all these extra little details. You can hear all the details and the nuances in the stories. That's because they kept going back and adding, just like a sculptor is building out a sculpture. That's what they're doing. They're adding pieces, they're taking things out, and that's the craft. And with that, I'd like to introduce our next reader, and that's Vivian Blood.
Once upon a time, around spring 1960, a Navy ship entered the port of Tunis, Tunisia, in North Africa. As is customary, US Navy ships go on med cruises often to primarily show off their power, but also to affirm their alliance and goodwill to allied countries. So, hundreds of people went up the gangway of the USS Perry. My friends and I were among the curious. While the boys went in the belly of the ship to tour the engine room and all that stuff, we, the girls, well, we just wanted to get on an American fighter ship. And why not survey the sailors while we were there? They were lined up at attention, ready to display their knowledge. But it turned out we really had a common goal: discover what a foreigner looked like. One of them, particularly, seemed eager to get to know me. So was I. He was surprised to discover that I knew English. Eventually, we decided to meet that evening, since he had a pass. I would show him part of Tunis. Well, I was late. And I mean very, very late to our meeting, which was right in front of the American embassy, to make it simple. He was not there. Who can blame him for not waiting a whole hour in front of a building late at night? So just in case, I rang the embassy doorbell. 2 young Marines opened the door. Surprised, but pleased to see a young lady in distress, they invited me right inside. Seated in a large sofa in the grand foyer of the embassy, this 20-year-old belle told Pratt and George about being late for this young sailor. And did he perhaps stop to inquire also? Those 2 gentlemen looked at each other and burst out laughing. Seeing my surprise, they explained that Marines and sailors are known enemies. No, he would never ask for help. And no, they would never have helped him or asked him to wait inside. They also admitted that they were very glad to his loss, since it got them to meet a beautiful young lady. While I was pondering these very important facts, We got to a friendly conversation, and they invited me to their weekly get-together on weekends at their villa. Suddenly, a knock on the door. They realized it was a gunny sergeant, their boss, stopping by. Immediately, George pulled me by the hand, and we ran. He pushed me into the ambassador's office under his huge desk. I was shaking as the threesome went through that same door. When they left, thank goodness, I breathed again. And so this adventure created the start of a friendship based on complicity. During the weekend, we went out to the beach or to the countryside in their beautiful long cars. You know those Briggs and Studebaker and all those old cars? The villa was in a beautiful part of a residential neighborhood with a scent of jasmine and gardenia. They had a butler who took care of all their needs, cooking, cleaning, ironing their clothes, and even shining their shoes. Although I doubt that he knew the secret of a good shine is putting on the shoes. On weekends, at night, the villa was not unlike the Roaring '20s. I just loved dancing. Perfecting my English was ideal. Discovering the American way of life? Funny, so different. George was sweet and shy, a real gentleman, but he quickly showed that he really liked me. So, when he confessed that he loved me and wanted to marry me, I was surprised, even shocked. "You're my friend. You remind me of my brother, who has even the same name that you do, George." Also, my mother would never allow me to go to the States. "And we have not even kissed." "It's not because I haven't tried," he replied. I continued seeing him as a friend, and he continued declaring his love for me. But one day, he announced that he had received his orders to leave for the States. He asked me again to marry him. Again, I gave him a negative answer. He said, "Okay, but if you ever change your mind, call me Colette, and I will take a plane the same day to come to see you." I was stunned. That's not how the boys I knew would have acted. And then I asked, "What is a collect call?" I've never heard that word. We don't have that in Tunisia. I was touched and impressed. I started seeing him in a different light. So I asked my mother if we could invite him for lunch next Sunday. She was reluctant, but eventually she agreed to meet him. At 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. A huge bouquet of flowers had arrived. It was for my mother. She was impressed. "You have good manners," she said. At 11:45, the doorbell again. Another bouquet, this time smaller. It was for me. My mother muttered, "We'll see." At noon, George appeared. My mother opened the door and simply said, "Hello, Jojo." That is a nickname of my brother. You want the rest of the story? Well, I'm in America, aren't I? I should tell you also that my mother had to go to the embassy and inquire about his life and history. Did he have a wife and children? I bet he did. And many, many more questions before she gave her consent.
We see in this story and in all of these stories how the use of detail, just layering in detail upon detail, and how those details reveal the character of the people. So it's not just George was kind, or George was thoughtful, or George knew how to woo my family. It's bouquet of flower upon bouquet of flower. And these are the details that bring the story to life. So I have another reader for you to hear. She couldn't be here today, but I recorded her, reading her story, and we're going to get to watch her now. Her name is Margaret Matson.
The title of my story is Together on the Mountain. My husband, Tom, and I eagerly planned a summer vacation in August in the cool and scenic Pacific Northwest. That was over 40 years ago. At that time, I'd done some traveling both for business and pleasure, but I'd never been to the Northwest part of the country. I was excited at the prospect of the rugged, mountainous terrain, although I must admit I was a little intimidated because my husband was a long-distance, all-weather hiker and a mountain climber. But he assured me there would be fun surprises along the way, and he made certain that I brought the right supplies, especially the customary heavy leather ankle-high boots that made me feel like I was carrying an extra load strapped to my feet. I wondered where he was going to lead me that I needed these lug-soled boots. But that was part of the excitement I felt at venturing into what was the unknown for me. We arrived at Mount Rainier National Park outside of Seattle and stayed at a beautiful lodge near the Sunrise Visitor Center. The first surprise he had for me was a hike up Burroughs Mountain Path to view the summit of Mount Rainier. Our plan was to start at the Sunrise Visitor Center at a 5,600-foot elevation above sea level and ascend about 1,600 feet to reach a height of 7,200 feet. This would get us to the closest view of Mount Rainier summit accessible by hiking. Our hike would take us to a point that was higher than any mountain on the East Coast. Attempting to build my confidence, I told myself, well, that doesn't sound too hard. And after all, I was wearing my new boots, which were blister-proofed with thick wool socks. We started off on an idyllic, wide path that was beautiful, open, and fresh. As we progressed, the trail became more narrow, not really scary narrow, but somehow it was a portent of things to come. As we increased in altitude, the reduced oxygen began to get to me. I huffed and puffed and said I needed a rest, which turned into a nap on a grassy area while my husband patiently waited. I awoke about 20 minutes later, feeling refreshed and wondering exactly where this fabulous view of Mount Rainier was. As we continued our hike, the pathway became more and more narrow, this time scary narrow, a little less than 5 feet wide. Suddenly, the trail took a sharp turn, and I stopped cold. I was overwhelmed by the sight before me. It was the largest mountain I had ever seen. It was entirely covered with snow, and glowing in shimmery golden light from the reflected sun. It took my breath away, and I sat down on the trail and basked in the feeling that I was in heaven. The entire scene before me was taken up by the incredibly enormous Mount Rainier, standing about 5 miles away from us and with a height of 14,000 feet. This unique vantage point made me feel like I could reach out and touch Mount Rainier and be swept away to a heavenly retreat. We sat there for a while, not speaking, and tried to imprint on our minds a forever image of the most beautiful mountain view we'd ever seen. I was expecting that this descent would be easy, as is usual for mountain hikes. I didn't realize that the descent would be another adventure, and to say the least, challenging. The path was very narrow. On one side, on the right side, and without guardrails or any other protection, there was a sheer drop of 900 feet to an exquisite valley below. On my left side was a solid, secure wall of Burroughs Mountain, which helped me overcome my fear. Regardless of my trepidation, this became another forever memory. Despite the tiring ascent and then hiking down the scary, narrow path overlooking the valley, it had been more than worth it to see these magnificent views once in a lifetime.
Thank you to Margaret. I really want to thank you all for coming to support these writers, to get to hear what they've been doing. And my hope is, I'll say again, just that this inspires you to get some stories down. You could hear in Margaret's piece, and it's funny because Camille's piece sort of crossed two lines. She did, hers was both a nature story and a food story. So the jumping off point for most of these pieces was 10 minutes of writing in the classroom. I gave them an assignment, write about nature, or write about an important person in your life, or in the case of Karen's piece, that was write about a special day, and hers was Halloween, a special holiday or celebration. So anything can be a jumping off point for one of your stories. We got to hear today, we got taken to different parts of the country, different parts of the world. Your stories matter. And I truly hope that you will just sit down and write for 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a big deal, and it's a way to get your story started. And then you can spend a bit more time working on it. Thank you again so much for coming. And I do want to ask my readers to please come up front so we can take some group photographs. Thank you all again so much.